House of the Dragon is shaping into a drama you could argue is beyond what even Game of Thrones was able to achieve. The story is both sweepingly epic and deeply, intimately personal beyond its literary inspiration. This series is about Rhaenyra and Alicent, right? Yes, but not in the way that we were initially led to believe. House of the Dragon is not about these two women leading different factions and who will end up on top. It's about the two of them not struggling against each other, but systemic and pervasive injustice. This was always a tragedy. It's just taking its time revealing exactly what the real tragedy is, well beyond its original George R.R. Martin pages.
She cannot succeed, Alys. Even if I willed it to be so, the people who support her will not be led by her. They look to a man for strength.
It was never about the race between Rhaenyra and Alicent. This show is their tragedy, their gasping breaths as they try to pull away from their neatly ordained downfalls. By midway through season 2, this is abundantly clear. The enemy was actually, and always was, the very system everyone exists in. The slow reveal that this show isn't about two former friends butting heads and only one being allowed to win was not the real premise. It was never a question of which queen will rise, but of how both queens are facing the same enemy: pervasive, self-perpetuating ideas of inferiority and superiority. It's not about women ruling, but women not being allowed to rule no matter what. It's that the idealistic dream of a capable person leading is a smokescreen for raw, naked, short-term ambition of the people who already have power, keeping the status quo that provides them said power. It's not about hope, and it's definitely not about actually leading and helping the people who they're supposed to be governing. It's about a broken system where power begets power. Does it get fed? Or hope beyond hope, does it change? The characters that have been erstwhile supporters of their respective causes, like Daemon and Rhaenyra's council on one side, and Criston Cole and the official small council on the other, had seemed to be supportive, if not somewhat questionable in their devotion. By the midway point of season 2, it's clear that almost everyone in both assemblages don't actually support the rule of their respective queen, but their own ends. Criston and Daemon both pledged loyalty. Even the heads of different great households officially knelt in loyalty. It's pretty jarring to see that didn't actually mean anything, much like the white capes of the Kingsguard, that the hope Alicent and Rhaenyra had would be blotted out by pervasive, relentless belief that women would always be inherently inferior and men always suited to lead, despite little evidence to prove this. Or worse, a system that actively causes these disadvantages.
If I had been a son, a sword thrust into my hand the moment I could walk. Instead, I was given my father's cup.
How many times have we heard that before? It's more than a lament, it's proven true. For Rhaenyra, she faces this problem most places she looks: her council of advisors, the portion of the kingdom that genuinely supports Aegon, and upsettingly, her husband, Uncle. The people who seem to actually believe in her are few among the Platinum Blonde set, especially with Rhaenys Targaryen, the one person who could really empathize with her and truthfully confront her with the awful stakes against her, gone.
Soon they will not even remember what it was that began the war in the first place.
Rhaenys is one of the real highlights of how this show handles tragedy, and her existence and demise epitomize how real, unjust, and awful the stakes and way of life in this world really are. The Queen Who Never Was is a pretty cruel title and an omen hanging over Rhaenyra's head. Rhaenys should have been queen. In a fair world, she would have been. Honestly, if the monarchy of Westeros weren't so hell-bent on keeping a woman off the throne, none of this would have ever been an issue. She proved her judiciousness and shrewdness over and over in the show, in counsel to others, and in casual conversation. She was incredibly loving and supportive as a mother and grandmother, and showed she was the anti-Catelyn Stark by embracing someone who was clearly Corlys' son with another woman. She balanced wisdom with strength and love. Bottom line, Rhaenys would have been better for it than Viserys. She had the head for it. She was a strong dragon rider. Her kids were super Valyrian. If there was any sense in how this was all actually decided, she would have been queen. Laenor would have been heir. Viserys would have had a happy life with Aemma, who would be alive, by the way, because she wouldn't have died trying to make a male heir. And Alicent and Rhaenyra would have lived perfectly happy lives without the bounds of queenly duty and prophecy tying them to whatever nightmarish existences they have now. Otto may have tried to marry Alicent off to Laenor, but aside from constant infidelity, life wouldn't have been that bad for her. That's for sure. Rhaenys lived a really tortured existence. On top of losing out on a job she was the best candidate to hold, this stupid persistent line of succession obsession is indirectly responsible for haunting and ruining big parts of her life, like her children being dead or presumed dead. It's what her husband is obsessed and consumed by, why her brother-in-law was sliced up hamburger style.
Well, have your tongue for that.
And the high-stakes danger her granddaughters are destined to face. Throughout the show, Rhaenys really swung back and forth on whether she would actively dissuade Rhaenyra from pushing forward on her claim or fight with her life to protect. You have to wonder, did she see Rhaenyra as her avatar, as either the hope for a new generation or perhaps an example of the reductive lot in life women like her are doomed to face no matter what? Is that why she swooped back over Rook's Rest when she actually didn't have to? It's sad to think she knew exactly what would happen in that moment and did it anyway because of the sum of disappointments and having been let down again and again in her lifetime.
Experience is valuable, yes, but the Dowager Queen is a woman.
As it turns out, a slate with women aren't fit to be leaders as a guiding light will apparently not allow you to lead if you are in fact a woman. Episode 5, Season 2 of House of the Dragon was exemplary in that it really answered a lot of lingering questions and intellectual quandaries in the show. Does Daemon genuinely want Rhaenyra to rule Westeros? No! He wants to rule Westeros. Can Alicent keep Team Green in line and stop them from being ridiculously inept in King's Landing? Also no, they shut her down when they were done using her for their own ends, effectively. No, it doesn't matter that in 2 cases, she's their mother, in 1 case, she's their lover, and in all cases, she has had the most experience and level-headedness to fill in as acting regent. The game was always rigged to keep her from rising to the top, and no amount of diplomacy can top that. And finally, she knows that.
You played your part admirably in a time of peace, Your Grace, but circumstances have changed.
And here I had forgotten.
It had always been a question through Season 1 and 2. What does Daemon want? Does he connive for the throne? Are all his actions because he was slighted? Does he love Rhaenyra and Viserys, or does he resent them? Does he support his wife as ruler, or is she a mere tool in his belt? He finally answers for himself.
When I take King's Landing, Rhaenyra is welcome to join me there and take her place by my side. King and Queen, ruling together.
It pains me to say this, but Otto Hightower was right and the shippers were wrong. Daemon's love for Rhaenyra is so thoroughly clouded in love for himself, in ambition, that you really can't be sure of what he felt for her, if anything, beyond a means to an end he feels he deserves. Muddled with his Harrenhal visions of young Rhaenyra cradling a baby, her beheading by him, and the dream scene with his mother, it paints a pretty clear and incestuous vision of what is in Daemon's heart. He believes in Targaryens, yes, but mostly in himself.
It doesn't matter of showing them whom it behooves them to follow.
Speaking of mommy issues, what can be said of Prince Aemond, Regent King? These two are truly 2 sides of one coin. Both the yearning younger brother who thinks they could and should be king, both hardened warriors because of that probably, both real weirdos about Targaryen blood, and both obsessed with fashioning themselves as king. And how'd that go? Well, Aemond trapped all of the starving people of King's Landing within the gates, which is bound to win hearts and minds.
By order of Aemond Targaryen!
While Daemon caused some pretty messed up acts of violence to happen under his, or Rhaenyra's, name. So, turns out running a usurper campaign under the banner of I'm the Targaryenist Targaryen doesn't make for good actual leadership, but can you blame Daemon and Aemond? I mean it. These dudes were raised to believe, 1, they have special blood that makes them special. 2, acting exemplary of that ideal makes them even more special. 3, their special breed of special entitles them to power at large and the throne. But then when you act like the throne is just a symbol of how awesome you are and forget that there are actual people who are hungry, who need medicine and resources and to be heard, who have obvious long-standing problems with each other, well, that's not something you're really equipped to handle. But when there's a problem that involves sweet armor and a badass flying dragon, well, that's your department. The fact of the matter is, the institution of the monarchy of Targaryen rule, of only men within that very insular group being suited to rule, is a big problem, and a prison in which all the women in the show are essentially trapped. And the non-titled people are even more trapped and essentially an afterthought.
Your Grace, what you cannot do, let others do for you.
House of the Dragon is all about the slow burn, and upon realizing the system Westeros is built on is meant to trample even the women at the top of society, like Alicent, Rhaenyra, and Rhaenys, what hope is there for others trying to find a place, like the Dianas of the world? What about someone who actually cares even a little bit about the regular working and lower classes of people who populate Westeros? Enter Mysaria, a low-born woman sold as a slave. Mysaria knows better than most not only the depths of depravity and humiliation those without title must endure, but how to work within the cogs of society. The White Worm gets what she needs by exploiting different factions and going unnoticed through a network of invisible people. Even as viewers, we're trained not to think too much about the little people of the show, but they're who this is all really concerning. Probably no one cares more about the actual small folk than Mysaria, and she is certainly the most successful character without an ounce of noble blood in the world of the show. By showing an ounce of humanity, Rhaenyra pulled Mysaria to her cause, and she's lucky to have her. With her unique point of view, she was able to teach Rhaenyra to reign in her own errant council by using his own proven lack of respect for women to get him to go take care of her Daemon problem in Harrenhal, and consequently, get his ass out of the war room. If the Westerosi way favors men from great houses, why not use that to one's own advantage and weaponize the nobleman's ambitions and tendencies for your own gain? Honestly, Mysaria's way of navigating Westerosi society's brokenness is probably the most successful, and Rhaenyra is lucky to have her. But there's always the nuclear version of operating on the edges.
War is a terrible thing.
This is not war. These are crimes against the innocent.
When all else in society fails you, be a witch. That's my motto for life, and I'm currently killing it. Alys Rivers is interesting because she introduces both the concept of magic and the concept of being totally 100% correct. She points out to Daemon that people, Bracken people, are suffering unjustly because of his decree, because of his lack of care of what happens to the innocent people uninvolved with the royal power struggle. He's not fit to rule in large part because he doesn't care.
And once again, in the name of power, it's the weak and the women who must endure.
She's in his head, she knows he's acting without Rhaenyra's command, and best of all, she sees exactly what and who he is. Absolutely selfish. So, if you can't enact national justice via diplomacy, succession, nobility, or whispers, just be a terrifying magic-using witch on the edge of society. Alys is important because she helps to underscore a point. It's not just Daemon who is unfit to lead the people, it's anyone who thinks like him and cares only for glory and conquest and legacy, and regards the people as cattle. By that logic, Aegon, Aemond, and even Viserys were also unfit to rule. Maybe even the noble women near power aren't fit either, though if the prerequisite for ruling is caring about the people, Rhaenyra is probably the closest to that among the candidates, with Alicent similarly wishing to avoid all-out nuclear dragon war.
Who's better suited to it, the Hightowers with their scheming, or Viserys' first true heir?
When we look at the marketing materials for House of the Dragon, like the mini posters of Alicent and Rhaenyra facing each other in steely resolve, it isn't that we were meant to pick a team and see which of these women would prevail in their cause, it's that both these characters are in a ridiculous tragedy, prisoners of the system they are forced to toil against, maybe pointlessly. This was never a battle of who would come out on top, but the different ways the two main leads would be used and dragged by even the ones they love into smothering obscurity. This show is about a rigged system that isn't built to award merit and isn't built to be fair. Westeros is built on systemic, crushing injustice, and the show is brilliant for that.
Shall I fight for my birthright, or shall I wait here until we are all destroyed?
The book House of the Dragon is based on Fire and Blood, never talked about interiority for Alicent and Rhaenyra, never let us see their anguish and genuine attempts to do right. While their characters are extremely different from how they were originally written, they also lack the show's characters' dimensions. They were written as easy to understand characters butting heads, craving blood, and cravenly sucker punching each other. This is not who Olivia Cooke and Emma Darcy are playing. Their characters are much more complex. Those who want power and feel entitled to it are the worst suited to have actual power to rule the people. Those who perhaps deserve power more may never get it based on who they were born. The whole system is built on exclusion and absolutely no one is helping the actual people who live in Westeros. Everyone is just divided on squabbles that ultimately don't serve them. In some ways, the many problems of monarchical succession are better exemplified in House of the Dragon than it ever was in Game of Thrones. While Game of Thrones included many shocking moments, oftentimes they were designed only to shock. All injustice, all the time, no matter what. House of the Dragon, in a slow burn, reveals to us along with the main characters that they live in a rigged system that is designed to keep them from prevailing, and that it's very likely all they've worked for will be for nothing. The realization that this, the grinding wheel, as Daenerys might say, is the real enemy and the real narrative is so absolutely crushing. I have to give the show props for designing itself this way. I'm devastated. I absolutely love it. Thanks for watching. I'm Kim Horcher, and for more House of the Dragon, you're already in the best place, IGN.com.